a humble black man, a man who makes himself of no reputation, a man who won't even let you call him a leader. He said only God can lead. But many of us can be used as instruments in this great band. And as we're in the 440th year of our sojourn here in America, we in music, there are 440 vibrations, and everything have to tune up to the letter A. And he says that God is using a call that all black people have been waiting on. It's a call that the Christians can grab onto. It's a call that the Catholic, the Presbyterian, the Baptist, the Nationalist, the Socialist, the Pan-Africanists, our brothers and sisters in the street. Brothers and sisters, I'm talking about the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, who's coming to sound the call of the Million Man March, and I know he's here. Brothers and sisters, do we want to see the black man and woman out of the condition that we're in? Do we support the Million Man March? Will we stand up after the Million Man March and continue to organize? Are you tired and sick and tired of being tired? We have to thank God for Pete Wilson. They're kicking affirmative action out, and now we have to affirm our own action. Is that right? We got to do for self now. And here we are, soldiers ready to go to Washington, D.C. So I want you to help me bring on our brother. He only wants to be a brother to the black man and woman, a man who has suffered no matter what they say about him. Every time they castigate him, every time they speak against him, every time they try to tell us he's a hater, we know that Farrakhan is a lover. Is that right? We know that he is a great defense attorney, and if you would just open up your mind and listen to him and close your mind and drop down the title. Brothers and sisters, here he is. Bring him on with a Los Angeles round of applause, the Honorable Louis Farrakhan.
In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, the Creator of all things, the Revealer of all truth and the Sender of all prophets, to Him alone do I submit and seek refuge. We thank Him for Moses and the Torah. We thank Him for Jesus and the Gospel. We thank Him for Muhammad and the Quran. Peace be upon these worthy servants of Allah. If I lived to be 1,000, I don't think I could thank Allah enough for His intervention in our affairs in the person of Master Farad Muhammad, the great Mahdi, who came among us and raised from among us a divine leader, teacher, and guide, His messenger to us, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I greet all of you, my dear brothers and sisters, with the greeting words of peace. Assalamu alaikum. To Minister Tony Muhammad, Brother Danny Bakewell, Maulana Karinga, Reverend clergy, political leaders, civic leaders, members of the local organizing committee, brothers and sisters. I first would like to thank all of you who gave as much as 1,000 or as little as a penny, and those who wanted to give but had nothing to give but give their best wishes for success. We thank you all. This is the first time in the history of our marches that it is being paid for by the people themselves. And therefore no one can tell us who can speak and how long. I want to thank the radio station. What are the call letters of the radio station? KGFJ. That is broadcasting this message live to the city of Los Angeles as we speak. I also understand that cable television, I hope I'm telling it right, Continental Cable is carrying this message also live as we speak. What is the Million Man March all about? Why has this idea captured the imagination of black people in America and in many parts of the world? What is inherent in the idea of the Million Man March and the Day of Atonement, reconciliation, and responsibility that has given us a platform upon which every segment of the black community can stand without giving up or compromising one atom's weight of their own ideology, philosophy, or agenda, but somehow the Day of Atonement, reconciliation, and responsibility, and the Million Man March has transcended all our personal concerns, our agendas, and at last, all of us are thinking first and foremost of the salvation of our whole people here in America and throughout the world. I am so grateful to Almighty God to be used as a conduit for an idea that I know comes from God, but an idea that has been echoed by many persons, some known, some unknown, but today their thoughts, their vision, their ideas are synthesized in the Million Man March and the Day of Atonement, reconciliation, and responsibility. As a child, I always wanted to see our people united. As a child, I cried myself to sleep many nights, wondering if God sent deliverers to people in the past, why would not He do so for us? I was privileged in my young days as a son of a mother who was on the fringe of the Garvey movement, and the son of a father whom I never got to know, who was in fact a follower of the Honorable Marcus Garvey. I was privileged as a child to have a mother that wanted her son to be concerned about the plight of our people. So my mother, at a very early age, gave me the Crisis magazine, in which were writings of W.E.B. Du Bois. I was privileged to read black newspapers, and I would urge everyone in this audience, always support the black press. It is good that in every city and town where there is a black newspaper, purchase it. Strengthen the black press, for in times of trouble, the only way our story will be told is if it's told through the black press, black radio, black television. I used to read the Afro-American and the Pittsburgh Courier, and every week there was some story about the lynching or mistreatment of some black person somewhere in the world, particularly in the South. And so I grew up hungering and thirsting for a day such as this. I don't believe I am alone. Everyone that sits on the stage behind me, the leaders, the teachers, the preachers, have all hungered for a day when all of us could be together. Seated on this stage is the father of Kwanzaa, Dr. Maulana Karenga. Dr. Maulana Karenga is one of the most brilliant black men that we have among us. And so in unity, all of us will be able to benefit from his tremendous scholarship. In unity, we will be able to benefit from the scholarship of all our great intellectuals. In unity, we will benefit from the brilliant minds of all our great spiritual leaders and teachers, our civic leaders and teachers. And in unity, our young brothers who are members of the Bloods or the Crips or other street organizations can take part in the formulation of the destiny and the future of our people. As we close the 20th century, this is the greatest sign that the future is much better than the past. Because through the Million Man March and the Day of Atonement, reconciliation, and responsibility, if all of us can stand together on that platform, then from that day, the unity of us will solve 99% of all our problems. We will never, ever have to look to anyone but to God and to ourselves to deliver us from the condition that we're in. We don't have a lot of time, so I think we should go to the heart of the matter. What is atonement? Why reconciliation and responsibility? You may ask, what do I have to atone for? The word atonement, when you look it up in any dictionary, describes some action that a person would take in expiation of sins, doing something to effect reconciliation, bridging the gap of differences. But atonement has an even deeper significance. If we look at the nation, and when I say the nation, I'm speaking of the United States. America is dying from an internal rot that is produced from the weight of America's sins. Paul said, the wages of sin is death. We are living in a country, the greatest in the world in the last 6,000 years. But she is dying as we speak spiritually. She's dying morally. She's dying economically. She's over $5 trillion in debt. To service $5 trillion in debt is almost $500 billion. When she reaches $6 trillion in debt, it will take almost every penny that is taken in taxes to service the debt, not pay the principal, just service the debt. When that happens, America, for all intents and purposes, will be bankrupt. Now, you as a black person, you as a member of the Chicano or La Raza community, the Native Americans, the poor, didn't put America in this mess. Unfortunately, the black and the poor are being scapegoated for the mismanagement of the human and material resources from those in government and in high places. Now, brothers and sisters, the contract with America, which is really a contract on America, is designed to try to balance a budget on the backs of the poor and the needy. It's too little, too late. So we are witnessing the social disintegration of America. The incident in Waco, Texas, with the Branch Davidian group of people, and what is coming out about the murder of those women and children is beginning to unravel the law enforcement mechanism of the country. The hearings on the murder of the wife and son of a Mr. Weaver, and the FBI's hiding the truth, is beginning to unravel law enforcement. The O.J. Simpson trial, the hottest trial of the century, is an education for anyone who would look. It is showing you the weakness of the justice system. It is showing you the racism that permeates the justice system. It is an education that God has allowed to put before the world so that we all may see the unseen and hear the unspoken. And now the tapes of Mark Furman that have surfaced to make us to see what kind of police department has been operating in Los Angeles since the time of Mayor Yorty and before, all the way up to today. The mindset of Mark Furman has been the mindset of many in law enforcement throughout the nation, that whenever a black man is in a position that you can take his life, and the coroner and the state's attorney and the police chiefs will all be involved in a cover-up, in a code of silence. Because after all, it's just, well, I don't want to use the N-word. It's just one of those N-word people that we don't have to worry about anymore. This is not Mark Furman. Mark Furman is symptomatic of a mindset. Every day the black officers who are conscious are more and more in confrontation with their white brother officers over the way blacks are being treated. Sometimes it leads almost to shootouts in the station house. The country is beginning to sense anarchy. White folk in the country are losing faith in government, losing faith in politicians, losing faith in their institutions. In the last presidential election, less than 50% of those who were able to vote cast their vote. This is a sign for the wise that there's gross dissatisfaction in America. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us that when there's 30% dissatisfied, out of that 30% dissatisfied, a leader is born to bring about a change. But there's no longer a 30% dissatisfaction. The world is seeing a 100% dissatisfaction. And so 100% dissatisfaction will lead to 100% change. And this is why in the book of Revelations, you hear the voice of one saying, "Behold, I make all things new, and the former things shall pass away." The world and their governments are to be removed because of gross inequity, iniquity, and injustice. So there's a social disintegration, political disintegration, economic disintegration. But in the black community, a pall of death hangs over our community. Our community is dying before our eyes from the weight of our own sins and from the weight of the sins of government against us. While we can point out the evils of government, the evils of racist institutions, we have to mature to the point that we can accept the responsibility for our own evil and for our own actions, For if we make the change, we will change others. You know, when a man cusses in front of his wife and is disrespectful in front of his wife, others who come in his presence may do the same. But if a man is careful in the presence of his wife, he will force his friends to be careful in the presence of his wife. What does that teach us? Charity begins at home, and then it spreads abroad. If you want others to respect you, we must become a self-respecting people. If we want others to stop killing us, we have to decide that it's time that we should stop killing one another. So the burden is not on white folks to change. I'm gonna say this, and I want the scholars and preachers to hear me. The burden is not on white folk to change, because they have been fashioned under the idea of white supremacy, and they have been hardened in that reality. They in and of themselves cannot change. However, if we start looking at the man in the mirror and make up our minds that we're going to make a change, if we stop acting out the evil of black inferiority, we will begin to tap and break down the evil of white superiority. White supremacy is being threatened all over the world. You can see on television young Asian girls, 11 and 12 years old, 13, 14 years old, mastering the violin, mastering the piano. Young Indians from the subcontinent mastering mathematics. The highest grades in the society are from the Asian community. Are you listening? The highest grades in the society in science and mathematics are not by the whites, but it's by the Asians. So every time you look and you see your superior in somebody with eyes that are slanted, playing the violin, you can't keep up. Playing the piano, you can't keep up. Playing in science, you can't keep up. In mathematics, you can't keep up. In sports, you can't keep up. In the long distance, you can't keep up. In the short distance, you ain't fast enough. In baseball, you can't hit far enough. In basketball, you can't dunk enough. In football, you can't run it wise enough. So what's happening? The idea of white supremacy is being crushed, not from the white supremacists, but from the emergence of the brown and the black and the yellow and the dark people of the earth. If we, the despised and the rejected, would accept the challenge of the time and rise to our potential, nobody could call you a nigger. Nobody could use the N-word, not because it's indecent. It really knocks me out to see them in the court. Did you use the N-word? But they never called our African fathers nigger. When the great European scholars sat at the foot of African scholars and scientists, they didn't say, I'm sitting at the foot of a nigger. They were sitting at the foot of intellectual genius. And in this world, intellectual genius is recognized. In this world, cultural genius is recognized. In this world, economic genius is recognized. If you would rise to fulfill your potential, then the world would recognize the genius that is buried in the hearts, in the minds, in the souls of black folk. And then the N-word would leave their vocabulary, and every idea of your inferiority would leave their mind. You would reshape their attitudes, not because they wanted to, but because your change forced them to. So, if we want to cuss out Caucasian people for their hardened attitude of white supremacy, you can waste your breath. If that's what you want to do, if it makes you feel better. If you just feel like you want to talk about white people and the evils that they've done, and it makes you feel better, well, you can waste your time and theirs and just go ahead. But if you really want to study the history of what your fathers have done to show you what you and I are capable of doing, and then accept the challenge and rise to the occasion, you can bring about a change in the world. You have the power within your grasp to change the world's thinking about black people. And that's why I've asked for 1 million black men standing tall, sober, strong, committed, dedicated, resolved to go to Washington. Why Washington? It's the capital of our oppression. Why Washington? It's the place where public policy and private policy, where we are concerned, is made. Why Washington? It's the place where the horrendous foreign policy that ill affects Africa, Central, South America, and the Caribbean is made. So why Washington? Because if Washington is affected, we can affect the whole world. The whole world sees black men as maniacal, as bestial, as savage. And the sad thing about it, we have fostered their view of us through the media, through movies, through television, through videos, through CDs. Our degeneracy is being spread throughout the world. The world is not acquainted with our scholarship. The world is not acquainted with our genius. The world is acquainted with our degenerate, antisocial behavior. Listen carefully. When we make a movie depicting true aspects of our community life, the people who distribute this have another motive in mind. You're trying to show some aspect of black life, but when they distribute it, they're looking at you and me through the eyes of the film. And they see a black man killing a Korean and laughing about it. They see a black man killing his brother and laughing about it. They see a black woman giving her baby beer to drink and we laugh about it. We see in scenes a man shooting dope in his arm or cooking crack, and the baby is there watching, blowing reefer on the baby. It's in the movie. It's on the big screen. It really happens. But that's not all that happens in our life. But that's what they portray of black life. They can make a movie on Bloods and Crips killing each other. They call it Colors. But they wouldn't dare make a movie depicting the life of Christophe or the life of Toussaint Louverture or the life of W.E.B. Du Bois or Marcus Garvey. You won't see their life in film because that does not add to the stereotypical image of black people that the world is trying to portray. They'll put you before the world, calling the Queen, our mothers, our sisters, our daughters, bitches. That's right. They'll put you before the world, disgracing your women and yourself. But they will never show you as builders of the pyramids, as the fathers of civilization, as the mothers of civilization. They won't show that to give you something noble to live up to, but they'll show you in your degraded state, so the world will see you as a dog, unworthy of life, so that when you're killed in the streets, who will care? The Million Man March started in my heart and in my head when I saw tanks in Tiananmen Square roll over Chinese youth. I was in Phoenix, Arizona, trying to get a little rest. And a few days of rest made me look a little better, feel a little younger. But when I looked at that TV screen and saw the tanks roll over those children because they were infected with the idea of what is called democracy, I began to age, and I didn't know why. There was a message in it for me, but I didn't know what. I came back to Chicago, and I began to be concerned. What was God trying to show me? What lesson was I to learn? I got a call on the telephone from my minister in Boston, Minister Don. He told me that a gang conflict had taken place and $250,000 of property was shot up by the gangs as they were shooting at each other. The police chief in the city had a good relationship with the Muslims and asked Minister Don if he would intercede to try and bring peace. When he went and spoke with the leaders of both of the gangs, they said, if Farrakhan will tell us to put the guns down, we'll put the guns down. So he called me and said, could you send them a message? I didn't like that scenario because I didn't tell them to pick the guns up. Why should I have to be the one to tell them to put the guns down? I saw a trap in that, so I said, well, maybe I better pray on this a little bit. And 2 months later, a sister called and she said, happy anniversary. I said, happy anniversary? I said, oh yes, my wife and I have just celebrated, I think it was our 38th wedding anniversary at that time. She said, no, I'm not talking about your wedding anniversary. I'm talking about the anniversary of your vision. And when I put the phone down, it all became clear to me. And it's even clearer to me today. A vision that God gave me 10 years ago, this very month, at about this very time. Sunday will be the 10th anniversary of this vision. And I think it's right that I tell you the vision so you will understand how God is operating. And for those who don't believe in God, if you know anything about Farrakhan, I am not a liar. I don't like lies, and I don't really like liars. My mother used to beat me within an inch of my life, not so much for what I did, but for the lie that I told to cover it up. So she beat lie out of me and made me understand the value of truth. I will not lie to you to make you a friend, because if truth can't make us friends, then yours is a friendship I don't need. Listen, whenever you lie to a person to make them a friend, when truth comes, falsehood vanishes. 10 years ago, around this very time, I was in Los Angeles. 10 years ago, at this very time, I was speaking at the Los Angeles Forum. 10 years ago, at this very time, the newspapers were filled with accounts of my alleged anti-Semitism, bigotry, hatred against the Jewish community. 10 years ago, at this very time, Tom Bradley was the mayor. 10 years ago, at this very time, members of the Jewish community were pushing Tom Bradley, who had always been a friend of the Jewish community, to condemn me. Tom Bradley did not do it, and I think Danny Bakewell and others who were close to the administration were trying to get Tom Bradley not to do it. I made a speech before 19,000 people. And after the speech, I was condemned by the former mayor, but he had not heard my speech. Members of the Jewish community felt it was too little, too late. I got out of town. It was hot in Los Angeles. I took a car ride to San Diego. And from San Diego, we drove into Mexico. And from Tijuana, I got a plane to Mexico City. And from Mexico City, I went to a little village outside of Cuernavaca. It is called Tepoztlan. It's a highly spiritual energy area in Mexico. I go there often to be quiet, to think. And there in that village in Tepoztlan, on the top of a mountain, there are the ruins of a Mayan temple. And I used to climb that mountain and sit in the ruins of that temple to meditate and to pray. But on the night of the 17th of September 1985, 2 days from now, in a vision, I went up that mountain with some of my friends. And when I got to the top of that mountain, there appeared to the side of that mountain one of those things you call UFOs. But the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us all about these things. We call them wheels. Ezekiel in the Bible referred to these wheels 595 years Before Jesus was born, Ezekiel had a vision of a wheel in the middle of the air and wheels within wheels, a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, and the wheel had eyes round about. This is real. Now the vision of Ezekiel that he saw in a vision has become real, and these wheels are sighted all over the world, even though it's above top secret. Presidents of the United States know about it and said, Carter for one, there appeared to the side of that mountain one of those things you call UFOs. But the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us all about these things. We call them wheels. Ezekiel in the Bible referred to these wheels 595 years before Jesus was born. Ezekiel had a vision of a wheel in the middle of the air and wheels within wheels, a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, and the wheel had eyes round about. This is real. Now the vision of Ezekiel that he saw in a vision has become real, and these wheels are sighted all over the world, even though it's above top secret. Presidents of the United States know about it and said, Carter for one, said that when he became president, he would make it known. When he became president, his mouth shut. On the front page of the Washington Post, there was an article by a Japanese pilot who had piloted for 29 years. And he was flying his 747 over the Bering Straits. And he saw on his radar a huge object. He said the object in the sky was so huge it looked like the length of two huge aircraft carriers. He said he watched it on his radar for an hour and a half. And then he described the wheel and compared his 747 to the wheel. Now the large aircraft carrier is 1/4 of a mile in length. Two of them is 1/2 mile. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us that that mother wheel was 1/2 mile by 1/2 mile. It has 1,500 little wheels in that big wheel. When I went up in the vision on the top of that mountain, I want you to hear me. Here. One of the little wheels came to the side of the mountain. 3 prongs came out of it like legs, like it was going to come over the mountain and land, but it never came to the top of the mountain. It just was on the side of the mountain. And a voice from inside it said, "Come." And I invited the party that was with me to come with me because I was a little afraid. And the voice from the wheel said, "Not them, just you." As I came toward the wheel, I was looking for it to come over the mountain and land in some kind of ladder or something to let me go up in it. But a heavy beam of light came out of that wheel. A light beam that was so thick, it looked like light that comes in your window when you see a ray of the sunlight and you see the particles of dust in the ray. That's how thick the beam was. And I was told to relax, and I was brought up into that little wheel on that beam of light. The pilot sat me next to him, but I couldn't see him. I never saw his face, saw his body. I knew he was there, but I couldn't see him. He sped away, and I knew he was going to the big wheel. And I was frightened because I couldn't imagine something that huge, a half a mile by a half a mile in the sky. As he was getting closer to the wheel, he maneuvered his ship in a way that I wouldn't see it and be frightened by it. And then he docked swiftly into the wheel. I won't bore you with the description of the tunnels. But he came around and opened the door. I still didn't see him. He led me to a door and opened the door and let me in and closed the door. He never came in. I was in a room by myself. The room looked like it was part of a larger room, but it could close off into a smaller room by metal things that could overlap each other, like the screens that you put in front of a fireplace. In the top of that room was a speakerphone. And I heard the voice of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad speaking to me as you hear me speaking to you. I know they say he's dead, but I'm telling you what I heard. This is my experience. Now, the truth of my experience you'll see in just a minute. When I heard his voice, I asked him some questions about aspects of my life that I wanted to know, was he pleased with? I will not say what the question was, but he dismissed it, and in his, he didn't say words, but I could feel the thoughts. He was saying, I didn't bring you up here for that. Yes, sir. A scroll rolled down in front of me with cursive writing on the scroll. As I looked at the writing, it appeared as though the writing was really in my head, but it was reflected outside of me. In other words, something was being written, but it was being written on the inside. But it was reflected on the outside, and it was in cursive writing in English, and I was trying to get close to read it, and then he spoke to me. And these are his words. He said, brother, I want you to hold a press conference in Washington, D.C. He said, President Reagan, named him, has met with the Joint Chiefs of Staff to plan a war. He didn't say with who or where. He said, I want you to hold this press conference and tell them of Reagan's plans and tell them that you got it from me, Elijah Muhammad, on the wheel. He said, you have one more thing to do. And when you have completed that one more thing, you can come again to the wheel, and I will permit you to see me face to face. Then he dismissed me. I got to the door. The pilot opened the door, still didn't see him. He opened the door to the little wheel, put me in it, still didn't see him. He took off out of that tunnel with tremendous speed. And then he took the wheel up to a terrific height and turned it so I could look down on the wheel. And it was like a city in the sky. And it reminded me of the book of Revelations when it said, and I beheld a city come down from heaven, foursquare. It was the new city. Now you may laugh if you wish. You may make mockery if you wish. But I came back. And the next morning on the 18th, I woke up. There was no remembrance of my vision. But on the morning of the 19th, at 7:19 in the morning, I had awakened late and got up to say my prayers. And as I was saying my prayers and finished my prayers, the whole room began to shake. The walls began to look like they were water. And I realized it was an earthquake. I ran to the window and the pool was throwing water up out of the pool. My wife was calm, laying in the bed. And I was wondering, where could I run? The bed was low to the ground. I couldn't get up under it. Never having been in an earthquake, I didn't know to stand in between the doors. And this thing was shaking. It was the great earthquake that affected Mexico City on September the 19th, 1985. Later that morning, I went to the home of Sister Tainetta Muhammad. And as we were having coffee, the vision came back to me, and I quoted the vision for the first time to Sister Tainetta and my wife. Well, I don't know what they thought. They didn't answer, say anything. They just heard what I had experienced. But later, the next month, October, I was to speak in Madison Square Garden. And the same hostile atmosphere that was in Los Angeles was now even more hostile in New York. You say, what has this got to do with the Million Man March? Just be patient with me a few more minutes. On the night that I traveled to New York, it came over the news. Listen, 60 of the little wheels were seen traveling from southwest to northeast, traveling at a very slow speed of 150 miles per hour. And the army sent up their planes and tracked them. They're too dangerous for you to mess with. This world has nothing to compare with it. They can take you out. Oh, man. America knows this. Russia knows this. China knows this. It's the American people that are in the dark about this. I spoke in Harlem, in Madison Square Garden. It was the largest crowd ever gathered in the garden. Filled every aisle. They broke down the doors getting in. It's true. People had their cameras and their tape recorders, and when they learned that they couldn't bring cameras and tape recorders in, they threw it in the garbage pail rather than lose their place in that line. The Felt Forum was filled and nearly 20,000 people were on the outside and couldn't get in. The phenomenon of Farrakhan was beginning to rise. But you got to understand, brothers and sisters, you see, if God is for you, it don't make any difference who opposes you. They cannot win. They cannot win. I started on a world tour. I started in Jamaica and the Virgin Islands. Then I went to Barbados. Then I went to Panama. And everywhere I went, the media and the controversy followed me. I was in Belize in Central America, and it came over the news. President Reagan had issued an executive order that no one was to travel to Libya and no one was to do business with Libya. Then the thought began to germinate in my mind, could this be the nation that Reagan was planning a war against? I came back to the United States and prepared for the next leg of my world tour. Meanwhile, Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, met me and asked me, said, Farrakhan, would you come to Washington and lead a press conference? There are 15 groups of us that are saying, hands off Libya. Would you come and speak? Would you formulate the words? I said, yes. I formulated the words and flew into Washington. And Kwame Ture looked at the words and he said, this represents us fine. And the next day, in early February, we had the press conference. There I was in Washington. I saw all the lights of the camera. And I made my speech. It is recorded for history's sake. But while I was in the speech, seeing the lights, the vision came back. And I wondered, was this what I was supposed to do? I went back to Chicago, and then the mission went up and blew up in space. You remember? The Challenger. I left for Africa. When I got to London, I was arrested in the airport. They held me for 12 hours, 13 hours. Then they put me and my son in a military vehicle with armed guards and took me to the airplane and gave my passport to the pilot. When the plane got up and had reached its altitude and was on automatic pilot, a beautiful black brother came out of the cockpit. And he said, Brother Farrakhan, with a beautiful smile, he said, I was at your speech at Madison Square Garden. Here's your passport. They want to make trouble for you in Nigeria, but everything is fine. To make that part of the journey short, the CIA poisoned the Nigerian authorities about the purpose of my presence in Nigeria. And when I was to speak at the National Theater in Lagos, they surrounded the theater with not only the police but the army. And they threatened my brothers that they would kill us if we moved any further. Thousands of people showed up and they were tear gassed. So I left Nigeria and I went to Ghana and they let me in. President Rawlings had his security people watching me, listening to me. And when he heard what I was saying, he opened up the whole country to me. And at the end of my time there, he allowed me to speak before the army, before the police, before the armed forces. And he came out himself and said, if I had listened to my intelligence gathering people, I would not have given this man entry into the country, much less let him speak. But when they said A, I said Z. These are his words. Meaning I disagreed and I found this man to be a noble messenger of truth. Now listen. But everywhere I went in Africa, the CIA went in front of me. They arrested another one of my sons and Brother Akbar and my attorney Lou Myers in Senegal. Arrested them at the airport. Put them under armed guards, and then put them on a plane and sent them back to Paris. What was this all about? What is it that you're afraid of? What is it about Farrakhan that terrifies you? Huh? They're not afraid of the way I part my hair. They're not afraid of the style of my dress. They're not necessarily afraid of my eloquence. But they are afraid of the ideas that my eloquence carries. And the idea of God that undermines the idea of white supremacy is the destruction of their world. So they must get rid of that undermines the ideology that rules their world. That's why Garvey was hurt. That's why Du Bois was hurt. That's why Paul Robeson was hurt. That's why Malcolm was killed. That's why Martin was killed. That's why anybody that stands up for God and for truth and for justice will be punished by the government of the United States. While I was in Ghana, my brother and companion, Brother Khalid, was walking with me on the road. He said, Brother Farrakhan, let me go to Libya. I said, no, I must go. I said, if I go and they arrest me, it will have more meaning than if you go and they arrest you. Because I'm more well known than you, and if they arrest me, it will bring a lot of attention to Libya. I left, sent my family home, and I went to Libya to warn Gaddafi that they were about to bomb him. It came clear to me that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was telling me, Gaddafi, Libya. So I went. I know it was against the law, but I went because there's something bigger than the law. A man got to make a decision whether he's going to obey God or whether he's going to obey man. And I made a decision to obey God. I went to Libya. When I got there, it was about 1 a.m. in the morning, and they met me at the airport, and they carried me through the streets with sirens blaring. They put me up in a fine suite, and the next day, everybody in the Libyan government, with the exception of Brother Gaddafi and his top aide, Jaloud, were in my suite. And I repeated the vision for them. Only I added something to it that had been shown to me. That they were going to bomb the airport. That they were going to bomb the waterworks. That they were going to bomb his communication. The only thing I didn't add was that they were going to ultimately kill him. Attempt to kill him. While I was in Libya, the aircraft carrier was in the Mediterranean, in the Gulf of Sidra, or as the Americans call it, the Gulf of Sirte. One of the American planes had come into Libyan territory and got shot down. The war was on. But I had already warned them, and that night they ran out of my room like Raid had gotten after some of the little creatures. I know they ran to tell Brother Gaddafi what Farrakhan said. There was a great conference, and I spoke to the conference, and I spoke my vision again, and I warned the Secretary of State, George Shultz, and Reagan, leave Gaddafi alone. Somehow or another, even after the American plane was shot down, there was no attack. My time in Libya was up. I moved on to Saudi Arabia. But after I got into Saudi Arabia, I read in the Saudi Gazette, listen to the words, a bright, shiny object was seen over the Mediterranean. Hear me now. A bright, shiny object was seen over the Mediterranean. That wheel has such power in it, I knew that it had interfered with the electronic communication devices on that aircraft carrier. It said there was some failure in the aircraft carrier. They had to send it back to Florida to be fixed, and they sent another similar one in its place. And while I was in Saudi Arabia, Reagan gave the order, and planes took off from England. France wouldn't let the planes come across French territory. Spain and Portugal wouldn't let the planes come across their territories. It had to come all the way down the Atlantic and refuel in the air and then into the Mediterranean. And with pinpoint accuracy, they bombed the home of Gaddafi. Gaddafi was in a room. They evidently knew from what was on the ground exactly what room he was in. At the last minute, he left that room going into the next room, and the bomb hit, killing his daughter, and over 120 persons died in the vicinity. They bombed the airport, but because he was warned, he got his planes out of Libya into Sudan. Go ahead. I went from Saudi Arabia to the Emirates, from the Emirates to Pakistan, from Pakistan to Beijing, China. But by this time, stuff was building in the United States against Libya. I got back in the country, and they don't know how. They were watching every port of entry for me, but they didn't see me. But I got in. And when I got in, they didn't bother me. But all the things that I had bought, beautiful shoes and bags in Pakistan, they took all of that. They had to make me pay. But I want you to hear me. 2 years later, 1987, the next year, pardon me, it came out in the Atlanta Constitution, New York Times magazine section, and Washington Post. Listen, America plans war with Libya. Now, when you read in the writings, listen now, listen. When you read in the writing, here's what it said. In early September 1985, President Ronald Reagan met with the Joint Chiefs of Staff to plan a war against Libya. Now, I heard it 2 years before. I wasn't in the meeting room, but I got mine from the wheel. Now let's get to the Million Man March. Why am I saying this? Because when that sister called and said, it's the anniversary of your vision, I knew that Gaddafi was a sign. The little Muslim nation of Libya was a sign. A sign of what? As Gaddafi was a thorn in Reagan's side, as the little Muslim nation of Libya was a thorn in the side of imperialism, so is Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam and the black community a thorn in the side of America. How are you a thorn in the side of America? Well, you know how I am. I hope I ain't frightening you. A lot of people have invested in America. The British have heavy investment in America. The West Germans have heavy investment in America. The Japanese have heavy investment in America. And their investments are largely in the cities. They want to know, is their investment safe? How is their investment safe if you're going to burn the town down? So you have become an international problem. People overseas want to know who are the leaders among black people and do you have them under control? Who is stirring the masses among black people and do you have them under control? Are you listening? So in order to set you up for destruction, many of the Bloods and Crips, you have not realized, brother, that among you are wise, skillful enemies that work for the enemy. They are being paid to keep the mess going between Bloods and Crips, between Chicanos and blacks. They're being paid to keep division among the leaders so that we would never come together. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the agents in the CIA that were working in the Soviet Union and in the European theater were brought home to work among the gangs. Their job is to put you against each other. Their job, I want you to hear me, black man. This ain't no soap opera. This is no game that we are playing. This is a life and death struggle, and you are in the middle of it, whether you want to be or not. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself, why are our Mexican or La Raza or Chicano brothers and sisters and the blacks killing each other in Ventura? Why is that happening? Who's benefiting from that? Do our brothers in the Chicano community benefit from a fight with the blacks? Do we benefit? Who benefits? You better put the damn gun down, and you better get your head on right, because the little damn pop gun that you got is just enough to get you killed, because the army is ready to move on the ghettos of America. Don't think I'm joking. Don't play me for no crazy man. The most dangerous thing that ever happened in Los Angeles was the truce between the Bloods and the Crips. Now you're dangerous, because once you stop killing each other and you got the gun, and it's only a matter of time before you become conscious, and then they feel you're going to turn the guns on them. This is serious. This is not a plaything. You're dealing with the most dangerous enemy of man in the world. They're smiling in your face, but they're planning your death behind your back. You don't know what you're dealing with. These are the same people that was sitting down with Martin Luther King in the Oval Office and then bugging his home, his office, and his hotel rooms. And these are the same people that was sitting down with Martin Luther King in the Oval Office and then bugging his home, his office, and his hotel rooms and planning his death while they were negotiating with him for civil rights for the black man. This is the kind of enemy that you can never trust. This is the kind of enemy that you can never let your guard down. This is the kind of enemy that you better put on the whole armor of God to be able to deal with an enemy like that. Drugs in the community, guns in the community, drive-by shootings, babies dying, innocent people dying, hatred in the community building for self, because our evil has reached a pinnacle. No preacher can ask you to love ye one another, because there's so much evil going on between us. It makes love almost impossible. 30 years ago, we knew who the enemy was. Today, we don't know anymore who the enemy is because he looks like us. When it came clear to me what was in the vision, I called a press conference in Washington, D.C. Now I knew that Gaddafi was only a sign, and Libya was only a sign, but the fulfillment of it was they would make war with me and the nation and with you. Ain't none of you leaders safe. They listen to you. See, you're not the same old Negro you used to be.
That's right. That's right.
You don't preach the same as you used to preach. It's a new kind of spirit in your preaching.
That's right.
And they're listening to you.
That's right.
So I held a press conference and I recited the whole vision. At that time, George Bush was in the White House. And I said, Mr. Bush is planning against us. Before Bush became president, he was talking about me as vice president.
That's right.
He promised the Jewish community right here at the Simon Wiesenthal Center,
That's right.
calling me a villain. He didn't care whether the Nazis wore brown shirts or white shirts and bow ties. He said the villain is the same. He's a man that was vice president. And now as president, he's singling me out as a villain when we are cleaning up the mess that him and his people made. You all right, Los Angeles? I'm almost finished. I know it's hot in here. But I thank Marla Gibbs for allowing us this opportunity to meet in this place. I'm almost finished. When I told them about the vision, I would accept no questions from the press. I said, and before you can make mockery of what I say, you'll see these wheels over the major cities. And I left. The very next day, in Washington, D.C. The wheels showed up. They caught it, and it was on the news for 2-3 days. And Tom Brokaw went to the White House and was interviewing President Bush. And he asked Mr. Bush in these words, Mr. Bush, what is your vision for America? He says, I don't want to hear anything about vision. You know why? See, wise people know when God is speaking to someone and through someone. The foolish may not know, but the wise have ways of discerning. Now, brothers, sisters, I immediately started a tour saying, stop the killing. I didn't tell you all that I saw, but I knew if you didn't stop killing each other, soon you would see the move made on the community. Because some of our leaders were asking for the National Guard. And what you don't know is that in all these armories, they are loaded with weapons that will make the stuff that we got. And don't you ever think that they won't bomb the ghetto. No, let me say it again, because I know you may be a little hard of hearing. Don't you ever think that they won't bomb the ghetto. Did you know that when when Oklahoma City went up under that bomb at the James P. Murrah building there, and 168 persons died? There was an article in the New York paper that said it's the worst bombing in 75 years. They didn't tell you what happened 75 years ago. Right in Tulsa, Oklahoma, we had a Black Wall Street. Several blocks, hundreds blocks of black economic development. And the whites didn't like it. And they started a fight. And the brothers went to fighting back. And the brothers were working out. And the stuff got so hot till they got these little jennies, aircrafts that they use to dust the crops. And they filled those jennies with Molotov cocktails. And they flew over the black community and bombed and bombed and bombed until they burned the whole area almost completely down. They blocked the escape route for the women and children to get out because it was to be a total slaughter. But the brothers fought so hard at that end, they opened a way up for many of the women and children to get out. Don't you think that helicopters are there just to take us from the little airport to the big airport? You better wake up. And you better clean up. And you better stand up. You can take me as your little brother, But I'm warning you in the name of Allah. If you don't move now, I don't mean tomorrow, I mean now. If you don't move, you will die. The pall of death hangs over us, and the weight of our own sins is killing us. And the only way out is not a gun, it is God and our unity with the God of our creation. By whatever name you call him, you better seek refuge in him now. Come on, come on. You will die. The pall of death hangs over us, and the weight of our own sins is killing us. And the only way out is not a gun, it is God and our unity with the God of our creation. By whatever name you call him, you better seek refuge in him now. Come on, come on. We're gonna wrap it up now. I know you're tired, but you can't be as tired as I am, as I've been doing this from early morning to late at night. Bear with me just a few more moments. Brothers and sisters, that's why we call this a day of atonement. Because we have got to close the gap between us and God, so that we can be assured of God's protection. I don't care how many weapons the enemy has. There is no weapon formed against the righteous that can prosper if you and I are with God and God is with us. I want to show you what you can do together in unity with the Creator. Now look at that word atonement. You all right?
Yes, sir.
When you atone, you do something that gets the weight of sins off of you. The Day of Atonement for us is the 16th of October, and I found it in the 16th chapter of Leviticus, when God told Aaron to do certain acts to atone for the sins of the people, that he might bless them. As it was for the children of Israel in their 400-year sojourn in Egypt, according to the Bible, so it is with us in our sojourn in America. We need a way to get our sins up off of us, so that we can be wrapped in the protection of our God. A day of atonement. Look at the word. A-T-O-N. 4 letters. 4 represents foundation. preparation. Foundation of something to be built, preparation for something to come. 4 letters. A-T-O-N. Aton. Who is Aton? In ancient Kemet, which is what is called Egypt today, in the 18th dynasty, there was a great pharaoh whom historians call the first individual in history, because he was the first man of this era to bring people to the worship of the one God.
That's right. Come on, brother.
The one God's name was A-T-O-N, Aton. And the symbol of Aton was a sun disk with 19 rays coming out of the sun disk, with hands holding the Ankh, or the Egyptian cross, or the sign or key of life. Aton, one God. What do you mean? Sun disk, 19 rays. The sun is the representative of God in physical creation. The sun has 9 planets. And the sun is the God of those 9. Source of light, life, and energy.
Go ahead.
Holy Quran refers to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as a light-giving what? Sun. Not S-O-N, S-U-N.
Yeah.
Jesus said, I am the light of the world.
Go ahead.
Why 19 rays in the number 9? You get the time of the gestation of life in the womb, with the number 1 in front of the 9. You get God, the one, standing over the womb to produce the sun, the light of the world. I want you to hear me. Aton, first 4 letters in the word atonement. Aton, who is the light of the world. It also means the brain, which is the womb of all ideas, with 9 systems making up the universal body, in tune with the universe. This is the microcosm, that is the macrocosm. But when there's 19 rays, you got God standing over the mind like a womb, feeding the mind with light and ideas that the mind becomes pregnant with, that come to birth as the ideas of God. Hands, hands. Sun don't have hands, but that spiritual sunlight is a human being with hands that are reaching out to a people saying, come unto me, all ye that are heavy laden with what? The burden of sin, and I will give you rest. Come unto me. Oh, what do you have to offer? I have to offer the key of life, the Ankh, the cross of life and not of death. 18th dynasty. Now let's look at the first 5 letters. A tone. A tone.
Come on.
What is tone? A tone is a sound, but it's the sound of A. Any of you who know anything about music know that when the orchestra of many different instruments, many different shapes, many different colors, but when the concert master, in preparation for the conductor, calls for a slim black reed instrument to sound the tone that the whole orchestra will tune up by, they sound the A tone. And A has 440 vibrations. It means in the 440th year of our sojourn, the A tone would be sounded in the name of the atom. And when you hear the A tone, you stop what you're doing and you begin to tune your instrument up by the sound of the A tone. What you doing? I was doing my thing. What you doing? I was writing my poetry. I was writing my song. I was doing my dance. I was throwing my ball. I was in the hall. I was in the room. Well, what you were doing? I was doing my thing. But I heard the A tone from the atom, representing the one God. And I decided I would tune up to make a preparation and lay the foundation of an operational unity that would lead to salvation. Now look, A tone. Let's get to the 6th letter. Then you get at 1. At 1. When you have atoned, you are at one with God. When you reconcile your differences, you are at one with each other. When you are at one with each other, you are ready to assume your responsibility. Come on now. Now, atonement. Come on, brother. What you meant to do? What you mean to do? I mean to atone. See, atonement is the action after the word. When you have made atonement, it is something that started and is completed. The reconciliation is done. The at one has been made. You're at peace with God. You have laid the foundation. You are in preparation. You are ready now to assume the responsibility that God wants to lay on your shoulders. Now, the day of atonement. A million men. Stop right there. Black man. It's a call to you. You can't sit home. Black man. You got to show the world who you really are. Black man. We've let our women lead us. We've let our women teach us. We've let our women console us. We've let them be all that they could be for us. And as a group, we have abandoned them and made them to bear the heavy burden of male and female, mother and father. But now we're going to atone for our sins against our women. We're going to atone to God for our failure as men to accept our responsibility, not to wait on a welfare check coming from Washington while the birds eat and the snakes eat and the buzzards eat and the raccoons eat and the baboons eat. But human beings of high intelligence sitting around waiting on a check, and then wonder why the white man call you boy. You'll always be a boy if somebody else is caring for you, feeding you, clothing you, sheltering you, and giving you a job. But God said, let us make man. I'm not calling on boys. I want 1 million black men. Say, will I be safe? Safer than you are in the hood. Will I be safe? 1 million strong. Will I be safe? The Lord is my strength, and He is my salvation. Whom shall I fear? Of whom shall I be afraid? Will I be safe? Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Will I be safe? If you come with us, God, we'll be safe. If you go in front of us, God, we'll be safe. So that's why atonement is to get God to be with us. 1 million black men say, well, wait now, I ain't got no money. Can I borrow some? No. Go ahead. See, you can't say you're going to assume responsibility. You're going to borrow money, you start lying right away, telling people you're going to pay them back. And then if you're blessed to get back, they can't find you no more. You can't get God to come with you if you're going to be a liar from Jump Street.
That's right.
So every man that comes got to make a sacrifice.
That's right.
That means you're sober. You know what you're doing. You got the right state of mind. You paid your way. Well, I may not be able to get it all. Well, get some. Get all you can. But no freeloading. Because a freeloader ain't going to have the right attitude.
That's right. That's right.
And we're not looking for 1 million freeloaders. We're looking for 1 million brothers who are ready to accept responsibility for themselves, their wives, their children, and our community. All right. Now that we got the brothers, we start moving toward Washington. Well, Brother Farrakhan, you know, we sisters have never seen 1 million men. And I know we ain't supposed to be there, but We just need to be somewhere nearby with binoculars. Sisters, this is serious. This ain't looking for a man day. This is making a man day. Some of you don't like that. I really don't care. See, we're either going to do it right or we're not going to do it at all. See, sisters, when you're looking for a man and you don't really know what you're looking for, you look for a man in the strangest ways. And I don't like the way you go looking for men. If you really want to find a man, you get yourself in order. But if you really want to find a boy, keep going the way you're going. You have your bra off and your dress cut so low that when you pass by, the babies start crying. You know all the men gonna be there. You put on the tightest thing you can find. What you selling? You get in a crowd of 1,000,000 men and he rubbing up on you. See, that's not what we there for. Don't get angry with me. That is not what we're going for. You need a man. God damn it, and you don't need no little punctified man. You need a man that is God-led, God-inspired, God-fed. And if you leave the man alone and let us teach that man, then you'll have a man. This ain't no plaything. If 1,000,000 fleas showed up in Washington, they'd be looking for a nuisance factor. And if 1,000,000 bees showed up in Washington, there'd be war room strategy. And if 1,000,000 black men show up, you know doggone well the army gonna be there. Because they don't know what these men are going to do. This is no plaything. You're not going there to rub up or to find no woman. We're going there for the serious business of the liberation of our people. Well, are you saying that the women aren't serious? I'm not saying that. But for every one of you that's serious, maybe there's 3 or 4 more that may not be. And when you go to challenge a government for the justice that is long overdue, then you don't make the mistake that we made in the 60s, thinking that you're dealing with some civil person with a human heart, and you put your woman and your children out there and they slaughter your women and slaughter your children. It's not about a macho thing. It's not about men denying our women. It's about men affirming at last that we love our women. And it's about time that we take a principled stand. on behalf of our women and children, our families, and our ancestors that made it possible for us to be here today. But what is the role of the woman? She has the most important role. I want you to know that women help plan this. We haven't sat down in one strategy session where the sisters weren't present and their input was respected at every level. This is not a macho thing. It's men and women working together to do something that will send a signal to the world. Well, what is our role then? See, in the Day of Atonement, Los Angeles is a city that has a very large Jewish population. And if you notice, the Day of Atonement is the highest holiday in the Jewish calendar. And on the Day of Atonement, even Jews who are not so religious will respect that day. That's right. They fast from sundown the night before to sundown the day of. They don't go to work. They don't go to school. They close their businesses. You don't see them shopping anywhere. It's a holy day. It's a day of fasting. It's a day of prayer. It's a day when members of the Jewish community will go to fellow Jews with whom they may have had some disagreement, some argument, some falling out, and reconcile those differences so that their slate may be clean of sin, so that they can be assured of God's blessings through the next year. Isn't that beautiful? As it was, so it is. Most important function, if we get 1 million in Washington, that's big news. But if we shut the country down for one day, that is bigger news. Now everybody in here has a part to play. Everybody listening on the radio and television has a part to play. Men, women, and children have a part to play. We must let America know enough is enough. We don't like what's going on. How do you register your dislike? Ain't no sense in getting angry because of Furman's tapes. We got to do something bigger than that. Getting angry. Certainly we're angry. Now, on the Day of Atonement at home, Susie don't go to work that day. Lord, can you see how the office gonna be when you don't show up? And you know when they get you in the office, you know all of where everything is. The boss don't know nothing. And if you're not there that day, they're gonna feel your absence. Can you imagine Los Angeles Airport? And we're not there? Can you imagine the transportation? We ain't driving buses. We're not driving any trains. Can you imagine the taxis? We ain't taking nobody today. Day of Atonement, see? No work that day. You say, well, man, they may fire me. Yeah, they just may. But if this is a high holy day, how can somebody fire you for observing your holy day? You say, well, who gave you the right to call a holy day? Well, who gave them the right to call one? Are you still a slave, waiting for your master to tell you when you should have a holy day? So, 5 more minutes, we'll be through. Can you hang with me just a few more? Brothers and sisters, look. On that day, we don't spend as much as a dime. or as little as a penny. Whatever you need, get it on the weekend. Because this is a Monday, we're not shopping that day. When they go to the mall that day, we don't show up. And you know the mall will be a ghost town without us. Won't it, sisters? Some of us just love that mall, you know. They got no money but just like to go see. But a lot of us got money. Don't spend a dime.
That's right.
Don't go to the mall. Don't go to the convenience store. Don't go to the supermarket. Don't go to the bar room. Don't go to the liquor store. Don't go to the crack house. It's a day of absence from all profane activity. Don't go. If you on professional basketball team, you don't play that day. If you're on a professional football team, not that day. If you're on a professional baseball team, tomorrow. If you play horn, don't play for white folks that day. Don't sing for them that day. Don't perform no comedy for them that day. It's a holy day. Can you imagine what Monday Night Football would look like without us? I mean, just think about it. Two all-white teams playing. Turn the TV off. Can you imagine what the NBA would look like? Ain't no black players playing. Turn the dial. Let's go to the news about the Million Man March. Because this revolution is going to be televised. When you're at home, here's what you do. Mommy and daddy that's at home, or if it's just mama at home, get your children up. Before day, before dawn. Wash your children, get them clean, and then gather your children and pray in the manner that you've been taught. Prayer must come back in the home. God must come back as the center of your family life. Then as the mother, you are the cornerstone of the family. Farrakhan is not saying, get back in the kitchen where you belong. That's not what I'm saying. Because you have as much talent, and sometimes more so, than your men. But sisters, no matter how much talent we have, we should never abandon the home, for the home is the base that teaches all the fundamental values that you will see displayed in community and in society. So on that day, if mom and dad are there, you're there together with your children. Teach your children the value of family. Most of the brothers and sisters that are in gangs, you listen to them. They'll teach you us a lot of lessons. Right. You know what they say? When you as the mother say, get out of the gang, they look at you and laugh. Right. You know why they won't leave? It ain't because they're just afraid. They have found a family. They have found a love that they never found at home. You've been too busy. You had to make $1. Daddy gone, mama gone. Who's rearing the children? Where's the nurturing love that should be in a home? It's not there. But if you will take this Day of Atonement and bring your children together, and then mothers, you must stop feeding your family the death burgers, the death dinners that you just pop in the microwave and sit your children down to eat. That is death. You gotta understand that your kitchen is not a shameful place. Your kitchen is your infirmary and your hospital. That's right. And if you really know the science of cooking, you know how to put those chemicals together to give your children and your husband and yourself everything it takes to make you strong and able to go out of that house into society to deal with it effectively. You ought to reconcile differences in the family with the children. And then if there's somebody in your family that you know that you don't even talk to anymore, if it's your mom, if it's your dad, if it's your uncle, if it's your sister or brother, call and say, sis, I know we haven't talked, but I just want to tell you I love you, and I'm sorry if there's anything I ever did to offend you, and I'd like to sit down and talk about it with you so we can reconcile our differences. You should reconcile differences with your fathers who are victims in a society, but we don't love our fathers. Go find him if he's in the city and tell him, Dad, whatever went wrong, I forgive, and embrace him. You'd be surprised what a step in that direction will produce. And then in your church, if you have a difference with one of the members of your church, or in the mosque, in the temple, in the synagogue, after you've done your home business, go on to your church and ask your pastor, Pastor, brother and I have a difference. Would you help us resolve it? If you can't resolve it among yourselves, the Bible says, if your brother has offended you, go to your brother. Perhaps you'll find your brother. Have you ever done that? You go to everybody else about your brother. Now go to your brother, go to your sister, and reconcile your differences. If you do this, the Day of Atonement will be the greatest day of preparation and foundation in our lives. So in my conclusion, there is no way that we could get 1 million men together and not develop an economic program to answer the economic as well as the political needs of our people. There are 8 million eligible but unregistered voters. We intend to get every one of the 8 million registered. And then we intend all of these brilliant leaders that are around the country, we're going to formulate an agenda that we will take all over this country for your approval. And then every presidential candidate will not have to deal with a personality. They have to deal with an agenda that's in the best interest of all our people. Lastly, if 1 million of us are there and we agree to set up an economic development fund, and all of us take $1 or $10 in that day and put it in a pot, on that one day we will have raised $10 million. And if The 10 million that support the 1 million that came, join us and put $10 in the pot. In the first month, we will have $100 million. And if every person that goes out tries to get 2 more persons to give $10 in a national treasury, that number will swell and grow so fast, it'll make your head spin. And in 1 year, you could have over $1.5 billion, sometimes $2 billion, maybe even $3 billion in a treasury. Now look, with that kind of money, what would you do with it? Now, look at this. Look at the NAACP. How many of you are members of that great organization? Would you raise your hand? All the brothers and sisters who are members of the NAACP. The NAACP is about $4 million in debt. The NAACP worked for all of us. Whether we belong to it or not, we have benefited from that organization. Why should the NAACP have to go to the Ford Foundation or white philanthropists to get their budget? If we raise that kind of money in 1 year, well over $1 billion, we could call the leaders of the NAACP in and say, what is your budget for the year? Write them a check. And then we will call you to account for the money that the people have given you and the programs that you said you would advance. You don't have to answer to white folk no more, but you do have to answer to your own people. How do you like that? And don't you know, with less than $50 million, we could free every black organization from depending on white people for a dime.
That's right. That's right.
Every black organization must be ours. There is no Jewish organization or Italian organization or Irish organization that you influence. But others influence our organizations because they put their money in our organizations and thereby they control our direction. That day is over. I'm serving notice on everybody. That day is done. Now, is Maxine Waters here? I heard somebody say her name. Maxine Howell. Thank you. Well, I'm going to talk about Maxine Waters. That's a fine fighter for our people. Maxine Waters. Now, some of you may disagree, but let me tell you something. Whenever you send anybody into Congress, if you want to condemn gangster rap, you better start looking at the gangster house. When you send your congressional representatives, you have to always be there for them. You can't send them to Washington, send them to the city council, send them to the state legislature and turn your back on them. We have to be able to fund them when they work for us so that they never have to look for outside contributions. Now, if we got over $1 billion, we can set up a political action committee and back our elected people to get re-elected and make sure that they respond to the needs of our community. And then with the rest of those billions, we have to nurture, develop an infrastructure and what my brother Torrance calls an incubator system that will nurture businesses in the black community That we don't have to condemn Koreans or Palestinians. We're just going to go set up service businesses in our own community to serve the needs of our own people. That's right. To keep our money in our own community. And with $1 billion, I can show you how easy it would be for us to start food, clothing, shelter, international trade, commerce, building hospitals. It would be so easy with 1 million men together, 10 million more behind us in unity. There ain't nothing that we can't accomplish. So, brothers and sisters, this Day of Atonement is your day. It's my day. It's our day. I'm pleased to say that women all over this nation are standing with us. I'm pleased to say that women are having rallies in different cities in support of their men, raising money to make sure that there's help for those who need help but no free load. Dorothy Height of the National Council of Negro Women endorses the Million Man March. Rosa Parks, the mother of the Civil Rights Movement, has endorsed the Million Man March. Maya Angelou, the Supreme Poetess, has endorsed the Million Man March. Over 200 black organizations, national organizations, have endorsed the Million Man March. And I heard on the news today that the Reverend Jesse Jackson is going to take part in the Million Man March. It's our day. I'm pleased to say that women all over this nation are standing with us. I'm pleased to say that women are having rallies in different cities in support of their men, raising money to make sure that there's help for those who need help but no free load. Dorothy Height of the National Council of Negro Women endorses the Million Man March. Rosa Parks, the mother of the Civil Rights Movement, has endorsed the Million Man March. Maya Angelou, the Supreme Poetess, has endorsed the Million Man March. Over 200 black organizations, national organizations, have endorsed the Million Man March. And I heard on the news today that the Reverend Jesse Jackson is going to take part in the Million Man March. Brothers and sisters, you don't seem excited about that. But let me say this. Jesse Jackson, one of the most brilliant men that we have. And he has his faults as I do, as we do. But this is not about fault. It's about putting our minds together to work out the best solution to the problems of all of our people. And in that kind of an equation, the Reverend Jesse Jackson is valuable. But I want to say, we met with Bishop H.H. Brookins yesterday and Bishop Hennings of the AME Church. And soon we hope to meet with the religious leaders of all the great religious traditions in our society. Well, what do we need them for? Hush. We need the men and women of God. And the men and women of God, Muslim and Christian, Hebrew, black Jew, all will be together working for that which is in the best interest of us all. Isn't that what you wanted? And so as we leave this place, As we leave this place, I'm sorry to have kept you so long, but I wanted to lay something on your mind, and I want you to understand our community is under siege, and we must not let the enemy do what they have planned. And the greatest thing we could do is to show our unity, and that alone with our atonement will bring the power of God with us. And I'll say this before we get to Washington. You will see a display of God's power on that day like you have never seen before. I want you to know that your unity is the critical piece for God to work through you to make a change in Black America, a change in America, and a change in the world. Thank you for listening, and may God bless you as I greet you in peace. Assalamu alaikum.
Brothers and sisters, give a rousing round of applause to the Honorable Louis Farrakhan and the Million Man March.